Negotiation skills for CFOs. Kieran Bird is the Business Development Manager at William Buck, and he's going to talk about negotiating skills, in particular he's negotiated in multiple markets over 30 years, and I'm really looking forward to this. Kieran always does a great presentation, and I'd like to welcome him to the stage. So Kieran, come on up. Ta-da! So I'd like to ask you, there's this belief that accountants are introverts, whereas in fact only about 30% of the population are introverts. Raise your hand please if you are in fact an extrovert. We've got a good smattering of extroverts, awesome, because I only need 2 volunteers to come to the front and play a very simple game. It's literally a 30-second negotiating game. It's not complex, it's not embarrassing, and you can't get it wrong. Can I have 2 brave volunteers? You don't really have to be very brave. Don't forget the chocolates and the copy of my awesome new book on developing self-confidence. Sir, thank you very much. Round of applause, please. And one more person. Ma'am, thank you very much. That is absolutely fabulous. Thank you. So here's the rules of the game. It's called Cross the Line. So 2 people, check, we're doing well so far, facing each other across the line. So I'm going to place an imaginary line. I'm actually going to point a microphone at you so we can hear a little bit of what you say. So this is the line. You are arm's length apart. That's close enough for us. And you have 30 seconds to persuade the other person to cross the line. Is that clear? You'll get the roses soon enough. Any questions? No? Great. You have 30 seconds to try and persuade the other person to cross the line starting now.
The grass is always green. Can't see it. Look at it. It's fantastic.
And they are up. Round of applause, please. And I'll leave your chocolates and your copy of the excellent Unshakable Self-Confidence up here. So that's a little bit of fun. When I run workshops, everybody plays the cross the line game. But a couple of really useful points come out of it. So here's a suggestion of how to do it. And no matter what people do in the game, there's useful learnings. But the object of the game was to get the other person to cross the line. It did not include don't cross it yourself. So the easiest solution is win-win. Why don't you cross to my side of the line, I'll cross to your side of the line, we both get something. So before any negotiation, we've got to be clear about what it is that we need, what we want, and what we don't want. In other words, what have we got that we can usefully trade away in some point at the negotiation? The other point is to at least consider thinking win-win. But I've got to tell you, win-win doesn't always work. You see, back in May of 1986, I was just 22 years old, and I'd just arrived in New York City. And I was negotiating a purchase from a retailer, and my response to his initial offer led him to respond with, true, but I'm not trying to suggest that even in the 1980s that this was common behaviour for New York City retailers. In fact, to be honest, you could very sensibly argue that I should not have been trying to make this purchase at all. Don't worry, I didn't inhale. Regardless, it is certainly fair to say that he wasn't thinking win-win, was he, this particular retailer? He was thinking very much the opposite end of the scale, outright aggression. But there is a genuine problem using any level of aggression in negotiation because more often than not, it encourages a response in kind. And so I responded by inviting him to go and enjoy sexual relations with himself. See, it wasn't so bad, was it? After all. Now, friends, I've told this story, it is a true story, I've told them the story over the years, and they often respond by going, so Kieran, a guy points a gun at your chest and you flip the bird? And I say, no, I am the bird and I didn't flip. What I like to consider calling it is, I merely presented Jetstar customer service policy. Jetstar wasn't around back then, so maybe that's not what I was doing. I did have one friend say to me, Kieran, where do you get your courage? I said to him, mate, how long have we known each other? You know my courage has an accent. It's Dutch. That is exactly where my courage came from that particular evening. We could call it stupidity as opposed to courage. But the moral of the story then is that in negotiation, win-win is sometimes perfect. Aggression is usually not, and there's an awful lot of tactics in between that we can choose from. So therefore, before a negotiation, as well as being clear on what we need to get and what we can give away, we also need to be very clear about which is more important. Is it the individual transaction, or is it the relationship? And by the way, that Google bloke thinks he's really smart, doesn't he? But his brother, Google Images, can't spell relationship earlier, if you noticed that. But regardless, let's shift slightly, direction slightly now, and get practical. For example, would you like to know the very easiest way to get a very big discount when buying a new car? Any nodding heads? Great. Excellent. Okay, so in 2000, I moved with my family from the UK to the US, and I landed a job that came with a car allowance for 3 years of $17,100. With that allowance, I bought this top-of-the-line Honda Accord you can see here, 3-litre V6, leather, sunroof, which was a $25,000 car. I think it's a 32% discount. I should have double-checked for this audience, shouldn't I? Regardless, a big fat discount versus the 10% that we ordinarily know that we've got to negotiate. So the reason I was able to do that so easily is the way the industry works, as you may well know, is you've got your factory, Ford, Honda, whatever it might be, and then you've got your franchise dealerships. So they're individually owned. And once a quarter, the factory and the dealership come up with an arrangement, an agreement for targets. So the factory will say, we want you to sell 50 units of this, 100 units of this, and 150 of this. For each of those 3 targets that they hit, the factory gives them a fat wad of cash at the end of the quarter. And that fat wad of cash is typically more than the 10% we're thinking of to negotiate with. But if they hit all 3 of those targets, they get another big fat wad of cash on top. That's where they start to make real money. What this means is, usually at the end of the quarter, dealerships are under great pressure to get rid of certain models. So here's what I do. What I did this in 2000. So first of all, you've got to be clear on which models, which make, which cars you'd be interested in. For me, I was quite flexible, so I had to get a 4-door sedan. That was the company rules. And I wanted a Japanese car. I'd been working for Nissan for 3 years. I saw the reliability stats. The other guys ain't caught up yet. The Koreans are getting very, very close now. They're very impressive too. But so for me, Japanese would have been fine. So I just looked at half a dozen dealerships nearby, I called them and I said, I've got $17,100 to spend today. What do you need to get rid of? Now, a couple of the sales managers did what sales managers do. They tried to talk me into buying something and give me the runaround. The third guy I spoke to said, are you from the industry? And I said, yes, I've just spent 3 years with Nissan. And he said, okay, I've got a Maxima and a Honda Accord I really need to get rid of. So get your ass down here and we'll give you a good deal. Sorry, get your ass down here, of course. So I went down there. The Maxima was a good deal, but this Honda was this 32% discount you see in front of you. And not only was it that easy to get that price, but then there was no selling. He just said, you're going to take it? Absolutely. And he threw the paperwork down and said, you fill it out. I've got cars to sell. They're under such pressure, it's worth their while doing this. So there you go. As long as you're a bit flexible on the make and model that you get and you're willing to wait till the last day of the quarter, that works really well. A few other quick points, because you might not always be buying on the last day of the month, etc., the last day of the quarter. So the first is always go in armed with a calculator, a pen and a pad. And I assume the CEO is actually the good stuff anyway, right? But it's worth it just to see the look on the salesperson's face. The definition of crestfallen. Like, oh no, this person's going to be hard to sucker. And then you should mention you're a CFO and they'll probably cry. But just taking that out gets their attention. Second point, don't buy fabric protection. It's just a waste of money. It's a rip-off. Third, they'll ask you up front, what is your monthly budget? Now, you're probably a lot better with figures than I am, but I still like to work with $1 amount. So I ignore monthly budget. I said 17.1. That's what we're working with. All in one price. We want to be very clear what we call in New Zealand OTR costs, right? If you've got the OTR costs, then it's much harder for them to try and sell you fabric protection and add-ons and what I like to call bullshit costs, where they say, oh, but an $80 paperwork fee is completely standard. Piss off, not today it isn't. Aggression doesn't usually work. A little slap occasionally is appropriate. The second to last point is financing. They ask you at the beginning of the process, don't know how you're going to finance the car. Even if you've got money in the bank or you've got a bank loan arranged, tell them you want to look at their financing options. As you may well know, those finance houses, they reach out to a finance house, get the best rate they can, and then they mark it up by about 2 points. So if you tell them that at the beginning of the process, they think, right, we've already got some money here, they tuck it away comfortably, and you can negotiate a bit harder. I'd still do it at the end of the month where it's easy. Final point on cars is that standard practice, certainly in New Zealand, the UK and the US, when a car lot buys a used car, when they price it, they mark it up by 50%. So that means you've got 33% margin to negotiate with. It's nothing like that 10% that we think about when buying new. Okay, let's have a look at a few of the laws of negotiating. The first is this. We never make money faster than when we are negotiating. Obviously, if we're negotiating a very small deal, that's not true. But if it's a substantial deal, a big purchase or indeed a big sale, this is true, and this is a good way to control our emotions. Most of us get quite tense when we're negotiating, don't we? And this makes us conscious that it's all worthwhile. The second point here is to not think percentages. Again, in a big purchase, let's say like a house, or you're buying plant for your company, we often think in percentages. But perfect example of why we should think about dollars more than about percentages is this. A few years ago, a friend of mine who was living out west, living in Tutarani, was buying a new house, and he was really excited. I went over to his house at 6 o'clock on Saturday night. They had just spoken with the agent, and the agent had just called back and said, just raise your offer by 2K and the new house is yours. And he said, really excited, just about to call back. And I said, hang on a second. Why would you be so sloppy over $2,000? And he said, it's a tiny percentage of the price. You know what we're paying for it? And I said, look mate, if $2,000 is important to you, can I have it? So what I suggested to him was, first of all, question, is there an obvious sign of competition? Somebody else making an offer? He said, no, she didn't mention that. That was a little naive on her part. So I said, there's no hurry. So why don't you just ignore it? Forget about it overnight. Nobody's going to make an offer on Saturday night, very unlikely at least. Wait till the morning, let the sellers worry about it, and then see what happens. 9 o'clock in the morning, the agent called and said they've decided they're happy with the offer, they don't need the extra 2K. Sometimes it's very easy to get an extra bit of money. The next point is the best negotiators view it as a game. In case you can't read that, he's saying, little did you know that Putin had never lost a game of patty cake, ever. Probably cheats. Again, talking about emotions. If we view any negotiation, no matter how big and important it is, as a game, it's much easier to deal with. The biggest negotiation I've ever worked on was $200 million. That was for 20,000 vehicles being bought by a very big public company in the UK. And they tortured us in lots of different ways, but we kept that mindset of it's a game, and we enjoyed the whole process, despite the torture. So emotional control is the first reason. The other is, what do we do with games we like? We practice. So, like anything else, the more we practice, the better we get at negotiation. The third law is this. People believe what they see in writing. Now, some of you who are a similar age to me might just vaguely recall this candid camera show, which was very funny. What they did was, as you can see in front of you, on a road that led from the state of Maryland into the state of Delaware, they just blocked it off and hung a sign saying, Delaware closed today. And they got a man dressed as a state trooper to stand next to him. So people would drive up and go, but I live in Delaware. My house is just down that road. That's where my family is. And he would just point at the sign, and one by one, they'd turn around and they drove off. Presumably to look for another way to get into the state of Delaware and go home. But it just shows you people believe what they do in writing. More recently, Candid Camera, before it ended, repeated this in another way. And again, it was rather amusing. Drive up to a municipal building, and it wasn't the normal kind of high-end building with a foyer and a reception. There was just one door. When you walked in the front door, there was a corridor. Turned left, came to the end of a corridor, and there was a door, and on the door was a sign reading, Other People Only. Now you can imagine the reactions of people when they went up to open it, and then other people, wait a second, what could that possibly mean? But no one went through the door, even though they had to do something in that building. People believe what they see in writing. Similarly, in the US, around the world actually, up until the 1950s, hotels had great difficulty getting punters to check out on time, till the Holiday Inn came up with the genius idea of hanging permanent looking signs all around the hotel saying, checkout time is 11 a.m. Immediately, 97% of people started to check out on time. People believe what they see in writing. Why is this important to us? It means that if our company is selling something, we're presenting a price, we want to have it etched in stone. Make it look really real. Something that's scribbled on paper and something that has round numbers is not the same as an odd number that looks like it's been very carefully calculated and on a glossy brochure, for example. This all adds up. But the other point is this, of course, contracts. The trap of contracts. If we can take control and write the contract, or at least rip it up and start again from the beginning, rip up their contract, it's a lot safer because we don't make the mistake of potentially not seeing some terms and conditions which seem okay at the time but might bite us later on. Now, as an aside, if you think, well, let's just say that most of the time we do focus on price, don't we? The bigger the deal gets, we look at all of the details more, but price is a very big focus. But we need to be aware of the conditions. So I want to give you an example of this. Does anyone have a pen in the audience that they're willing to sell me for 200, this is not fake money, it's real money, 200 New Zealand, you have a pen there, sir? Great, what brand is it? It's a William Buck, well that's a beautiful pen. The William Buck pens are beautiful. Okay, so we've agreed on a price, and I know you got that one for a very good price, $200. So can we do the deal for $200, that is the price, and I set the terms? No? Would anyone else like to sell me a pen for $200? And are you willing for me to set the terms? Excellent, thank you very much. I love those William Buck pens, so I'm very happy to purchase. Now the terms are simply that each time we bump into each other in Invercargill Airport, I'll give you 20 cents. And I've not been there since the 90s, so the skeptic's view over here was of course quite right. Sorry, you can keep that beautiful pen. Alright, let's move on and have a look at some core tactics, shall we? The first is, get the other side to commit first. Isn't that our Prime Minister? Isn't she already engaged? I'm not sure what's going on there, but regardless, it is better to get the other side to commit first. There's a caveat. If it's a relationship negotiation, relationship's really important, then you weigh it up. But typically, if we're on the selling side, what we want to do, and salespeople do this to us all the time with cars and so on, we want to build the value first and then ask about the budget. And then we know where we're going from. And of course, we don't want to be led down that path if we're on the buying side. The next tactic is never say yes to the first offer. So, as an example of why this is, let's say that over the last few years, you've been coveting your neighbour's car. You looked a bit dreamy there, sir. Coveting your neighbour's car. And one day your neighbour mentions that they're thinking of selling their car. You think, ooh, I quite like that BMW. And in your mind, you figure it's worth about $20,000. And she says to you, well, are you interested? Well, I might be. Well, make me an offer. And you think, 20,000? I'll go a bit low. I'll start at 18. And you say, well, I'll pay you 18. And she goes, great, done. How do you feel? Don't! We automatically feel that way, don't we? If somebody jumps at the first offer, oh, my first offer must have been wrong. So even in a relationship negotiation, we've got to be a little bit careful about that one. The next one is react physically. Now, I was at a conference late last week and I was practicing this, and somebody came by and he was quite mean, and he suggested that Mr. T probably isn't being intimidated by the fist, he might be worried about the other hand, as being Michael Jackson. But regardless, reacting physically in a negotiation makes a lot of sense. You're probably familiar, or you may well be familiar with Albert Mehrabian's research from UCLA. It was published in 1971. And found that of the way we communicate, basically 7% is the words we use, 38% is more or less tone of voice, and fully 55% is body language. So, if we get an offer we don't like, even if we do like it, but we don't want to appear that we like it, we can go, but if we just give a little bit of the fright reaction, which is just a slight movement backwards, just a tiny wince in the face, that has a powerful effect. For the other person, there's a little twist in the gut of, ooh, I didn't get that right. I'd better be cautious. On the phone, 70% of how we communicate is tone of voice. So when you made an offer on the phone, just a little, are you serious? Wow. By the way, if you doubt that, if you think, hang on, I'm a highly analytical CFO, I choose my words carefully, I communicate by the words I use. Try this. At the end of today, give a loved one a call and tell them you love them. I don't care if it's a family member, good friend. We typically don't do this enough, do we? So tell them you love them in this tone of voice and see how it goes over. Tone of voice and body language are powerful. Next point, I love this tactic, and you'll see why. Higher power. Click. Now the reason this tactic is so powerful is the guy who pointed the gun at my poor, naive young Kiwi back in 1986 in New York, as I say, he thinks of negotiation as power, so he goes right to the most aggressive end of the scale. But negotiation is not typically about boxing, where we just knock somebody out. It's not about wrestling, where we just use force to pin them down. It's much more like jiu-jitsu, where you roll with the other person's power and you wrap them up in subtle ways that they are not aware of until suddenly they've got their arm locked in a very painful position and they need to give up. That's what negotiation should be. So, a quick story for you. Again, going back to 2000, just moved with my family from the UK to the US, about to buy a Honda Accord. We were a little behind the times, not very fashionable people, And my wife and I, well, I just went along with it. My wife was very keen on getting one of those green and white striped couches that was really big in the 90s, okay? We saw one advertised nearby as new, $250. Okay, babe, I'll go and get the couch, I'll come back. I won't pay more than $200 for it. But as I was driving, I was thinking, higher power. I wonder what I can get this for really comfortably. Because in my 20s, I would have gone, I'm not paying that for you, buddy. And the guy just responded, yes, you are. You know, power against power doesn't work so well. So here's what I did. I pulled up at their house, very nice house, I must say, and they actually came out of the front door, and the couch was already sitting in the driveway. We spoke for just a couple of seconds. I called my wife, spoke to them again, and then I left with the couch, having paid $50. They made 3 errors, you see. The first one was the couch in the driveway. That's what we call a selling signal. They desperately want it out today. They're just looking for room in the house. Aha. Second point, they were so keen, they were obviously standing by the window, or by the door, because they came out straight away. I didn't even have to ring the bell. So that gave me a considerable sense of power. But then I used higher power on them, a form of absolute jiu-jitsu that they did not understand was happening. So I got out of my car, shook hands, and then I started to look a little sheepish, and I said, oh, it's got the narrow stripes. I thought it had the wide stripes. There was a photo in the ad. I thought it was the wide stripes. I better call my wife and see what she thinks. So I walked away, not far enough away they couldn't hear me, pulled out my phone and called my wife and said, oh, babe, so sorry, it's got the narrow stripes, not the wide stripes. Do you want, oh no? No? Oh, but I've driven all this way. Shouldn't I make some kind of offer? Oh, really? By then I was a little bit slumped down, looking really weak and sad, and I came over and I said, gee, I'm sorry, my wife doesn't want to offer more than $50. And he said, that's absolutely fine. Should have gone 25, right? But okay, that's a little naughty. This was not a relationship negotiation, it was a transaction. And that's what I mean, when there's transaction, there's some pretty cool stuff you can do when other people aren't trained negotiators. But they got what they wanted, didn't they? They had a very nice house, they just wanted the couch out of there. And frankly, I think he got a little more than that too. He thought, look at me here with my healthy relationship, look at this poor, weak, afraid foreigner in his relationship. He's obviously not so good. Okay, don't offer to split the difference. So let's go back to your neighbour in the car. So your neighbour says, what would you like to offer? You say 18, she doesn't make you go, go! By jumping at it, she says, oh, I was thinking 20. I think 20 is a fair price. Now, what do our minds start to think as Kiwis? We start to think split the difference, don't we? Right down the middle, it's fair. That British sense of fairness that is a core value for us Kiwis. And you can do that. Again, relationship, maybe that is the right thing to do because you like this person. Depends on how early they mow their lawns, that kind of thing. Because if not, here's what you can do. You can say, if she goes, well, let's split the difference, 19. Oh, you can come to 19, eh? That's really nice of you. I better go and check with the family. Check with, you know, the wife, whatever, make it sound as vague as possible, and I'll come back. And then you come back and go, oh, it turns out she doesn't actually like the car that much, a reluctant buyer. And yeah, I definitely couldn't go up to, but you came down to 19. I'll tell you what, I think I can probably talk her into it. Let's just split the difference at 18.5. So you get to split the difference twice by using higher power. The other way to do it, of course, is this, the taper. So using that same formula, so she's at 20k, you're at 18k, you can split the difference at 19, or higher power, and bring it down to 18.5, or you can taper your concessions. So you go from 18 to 18.3, 5, 6, 650. As you can see very clearly, you've conceded 300, 200, 150. This makes it look very, very inevitable that the concessions are about to peter out. It's always dangerous to repeat the same size concessions. It encourages a strong negotiator to simply keep asking. Next point, position for easy acceptance. Now this is mostly about personality types. If you are dealing with a dominant personality type, so the kind of person who, when you call them on the phone, their voice kind of sounds like, "Who are you? Why are you wasting my time?" Male or female, their voices tend to be a little deep. When you meet them, they'll stand quite close. They'll shake your hand quite firmly. They look quite closely at you. Speak quickly. You know the people I mean. They're often the boss. A lot of CFOs, I would imagine, have this personality type, hence the extroverts in the room. That personality type, that dominant, that driver type, typically sees winning as a habit and is very productive, very good at doing what they want to do. So they like in negotiations typically to get something extra at the end. So when you recognise that type is in charge, be prepared for that. Now this guy's a bit of a bad example. I wouldn't negotiate with him over anything because the guy just doesn't pay his bills. So it wouldn't be a good idea. But anyone who comes across even 1/10 as dominating as Donald Trump, keep something up your sleeve that you can give away right at the end. It is satisfying that ego, that self-belief of that other person, and can just make closing the deal really easy. The squeeze, I love this. So this is one that you can use to practice like your golf. So if you go into Noel Leeming to buy some kind of whiteware, and you can look at the price and then say simply, you'll have to do better than that. The person will probably say, "Oh, I can't give you a discount." No problem. May I talk to the sales manager or whoever has that authority? When they come up, get them to repeat the price and say, "You'll have to do better than that," and then say nothing. It puts on a little bit of pressure, and it is amazing how people who are inexperienced can start to give away discounts. It's a great tactic. Be careful about it when it's applied to you. So when Kissinger became National Security Advisor, and he asked the Undersecretary for Southeast Asia to write him a report on Southeast Asia, Vietnam of course, he wanted to know what was going on. The report landed on Kissinger's desk, thick and thorough, and the next morning landed back on the Undersecretary's desk with Kissinger's handwriting on the cover. "You'll have to do better than that." So the Undersecretary did. He got more people involved, he worked hard, and he hand-delivered it to Kissinger this time. And he said, "Sir, we've put great effort into this, it's an excellent report." Next morning it landed back on his desk, Kissinger's handwriting, "You'll have to do better than that." Well, this time they burned the midnight oil. He took it in, he presented it again, and he said, "Mr. Secretary, we have used every source, every expert available. You will not possibly get a more thorough report on Southeast Asia." And Kissinger said, "Good, I'll read this one." So Kissinger knew how to manipulate his employees to higher levels of effort. But what he had done was he got his Undersecretary to negotiate against himself. So if anybody ever does this to you, there's 2 steps to defending it. The first one is defend what you just said. Defend your price. "You'll have to do better than that." What? Are you kidding me? This is the lowest price you're going to find in Auckland. This is the latest whiz-bang model. Most people don't even have it in stock, etc. And then if they still say, "You'll have to do better than that," say, "What do you mean? By how much?" Be specific. So you're not negotiating against yourself. Make sense? And the what next is always shut up. He or she who speaks first loses. Okay, we're heading now towards the finish, so appropriately we're going to talk about the deadline. Deadlines can be very effective ways to squeeze your opponent, and we don't like it when we're squeezed. And the 2 introvert personality types, that is the analytic type and the amiable type, they don't like to be squeezed on time. So it's quite an effective way to put them under pressure. But the main thing is to avoid being put under pressure yourself. Test those deadlines. You know, if you're doing a government RFP, those deadlines are hard to break, but it's amazing how often you can break a deadline just by checking. So we're back to talking about Kissinger and his crew. This was an incredible example of an attempt to use deadlines by 2 sides in a very, very serious negotiation. Early 70s, Nixon and Kissinger's team start to negotiate with the North Vietnamese in from Paris. The Americans rented out a whole floor of the Hilton Hotel, that's where they were staying. The Vietnamese bought a villa in the country. Now, the Americans were looking to apply pressure on the Vietnamese by continuing to bomb during the negotiations. The implication's obvious. Every day we don't come to an agreement, we are killing your people. And the Vietnamese showed just how intimidated they were by that, by investing in a villa in the country. We're willing to take our time. And then, you probably can't read what it says in the headline there. The US and the Vietnamese spent the first 5 months arguing over the size of the conference table. This was true, it was in the news at the time, and I guarantee you it wasn't the Yanks pushing for a specific size table. The Vietnamese were making it plain that they were not going to be bullied by a deadline. Why? Because the Americans had a specific deadline, election. They knew perfectly well that Nixon wanted a good deal by that election, and the Vietnamese made it plain, and they stuck with, you ain't getting a good deal under any circumstances, and of course the Americans basically got absolutely nothing. So, when somebody hits you with the deadline, always check what it is in advance. So, my suggestion to you now is to get more into thinking of negotiating as a game, make it a habit. Go, if you've been thinking about buying something and your other half says no, well now you have my permission. So you can go shopping in high-end boutiques, they'll negotiate. You can go shopping at Noel Leeming's and use the squeeze, buy whatever it is you want. As long as you get a discount, you've done you and your family and your company a great service. Thank you very much.